Imagine a creature just colossal, making today's biggest elephants look, well, almost small. A 10-ton behemoth walking the earth millions of years ago. But it's not just about size. This thing was like an elephant from a parallel universe. Instead of tusks pointing up and out, picture these massive hooks curving straight down then back under its own jaw. Just bizarre. So today we're diving deep into Dinotherium. We're going through the sources you sent, trying to really grasp its strange biology, the mysteries that baffled scientists, and how it dominated for so long.
And that name, Dinotherium, it tells you something right away. It literally means terrible mammalian beast. It's in that ancient elephant family tree, the proboscideans. But the scale, it's just staggering. We're talking about an animal potentially reaching 4.5 meters at the shoulder. That's nearly 15 feet.
Wow. So much taller than an African elephant.
Significantly taller, yeah. African bush elephants might hit 3, maybe 4 meters if they're huge. Dinotherium towered over them. And the weight up to 10 tons. I mean, that's like 2 big modern elephants rolled into one. It was true gigantism for its era.
Okay, let's really get into this, because the size is one thing, but the skull, that's where it gets really weird, right? That's the big departure.
Absolutely. Modern elephants, their tusks are basically super long upper teeth, incisors, growing out from the top jaw. Dinotherium, it didn't even have those upper incisor teeth. Nothing there. Its whole setup was flipped.
So those defining tusks, these massive tools, they came from the bottom jaw.
Exactly. 2 huge tusks, maybe 2.5 meters long sometimes, growing right out of the lower incisors and hooking sharply down and back. It's this feature that makes it look so incredibly strange. I mean, compared to the upward curving tusks we see in elephants today, it seems almost wrong, evolutionarily speaking.
But there might have been an advantage to that weird setup, structurally.
That's a really interesting point. Because the tusks grew down from the lower jaw, the skull itself might not have needed the same heavy-duty reinforcement up top that you see in other massive proboscideans. So the skull itself could have been, relatively speaking, a bit lighter, maybe a subtle advantage in terms of energy or movement for such a huge animal.
And it was that look, those downward hooks, that just fired up people's imaginations for centuries, wasn't it? From ancient Greeks finding fossils to, 19th century scientists.
Oh, definitely. It's fascinating how many different ideas people came up with to explain those tusks, especially before they could really analyze the wear patterns on the fossils. They just couldn't figure out why a huge land animal would have tusks pointing down like that, which led to a whole bunch of aquatic theories back in the 1800s.
Right. The thinking was, it's too big, the tusks look awkward on land, so maybe it lived in the water.
Exactly. And if it's aquatic, the tusks must have a water-related job. So one idea was maybe it used them to scrape the bottom of rivers or lakes for plants, like giant rakes.
Okay, I can sort of picture that.
Another thought was maybe they were like climbing kicks, to haul its massive body out of the water onto the riverbank.
Which sounds pretty strenuous. But then came the really creative one. The geologist William Buckland, right? The living pontoon boat.
Ah, yes, the living pontoon boat. It's such a wonderfully imaginative idea.
Buckland seriously proposed that Dinotherium used those hooked tusks like anchors. It would hook itself onto the riverbank.
Right, hook on and then just float there, asleep, with its body in the water and its nose up for air, safe from predators on land.
It's a great image.
Yeah.
But probably not quite right.
Not quite, no. It's a classic case of imagination running a bit wild before the hard evidence came in. The real story turned out to be less dramatic, found in the tiny scratches and wear marks on the fossil tusks themselves.
So what did those marks actually show? Forget pontoon boats, what were they really doing?
Well, the wear patterns suggest something much more like what modern elephants do, just adapted differently. They show scraping against tough stuff. It looks like they were mainly used for stripping bark off trees or maybe digging into the soil for roots and tubers. Practical stuff for a giant herbivore.
Okay, stripping bark, digging, I get that. But why the downward curve? Wouldn't upward tusks work just as well, like modern elephants? Was there a specific advantage to pointing down?
That's the key question, isn't it? It points towards specialization. While upper tusks are great for reaching up, pushing things over, maybe defense, these downward tusks could have been perfect for low-level work. Imagine trying to dig up roots right at ground level or strip bark from the base of a tree. Those lower hooks would give you incredible leverage right where you need it, in a way upward tusks just couldn't manage as easily. Specialized tools for a specific way of feeding.
Right, specialized for foraging low down. Okay, that makes sense. So if we know a bit about how it ate, what about how it drank? The trunk is still a bit of a mystery, isn't it?
It is, because soft tissue like trunks doesn't fossilize. But we have clues. The nasal opening in the skull is huge, which strongly suggests it had a pretty substantial wide trunk.
But I remember reading there was some debate because its neck was longer than an elephant's.
Yeah, that's true. Dinotherium did have a slightly longer neck, which gave it a bit more flexibility. That led some early researchers to think maybe it had a shorter trunk, kind of like a taper's, because the neck could reach further.
Hmm. But could it really reach the ground to drink with just a longer neck? It was massive.
That's the sticking point. Even with a longer neck, for a 10-ton animal, that neck is still pretty short relative to its body size. Getting its head all the way down to water level without a long trunk would mean lots of awkward kneeling or bending. It just seems really inefficient from an energy standpoint for such a giant creature. So the general consensus now is, yeah, it almost certainly needed and had a long, powerful trunk for drinking and feeding, regardless of the slightly longer neck.
Okay, so we have this picture of a giant, specialized, trunked herbivore with downward tusks.
Let's zoom out. Where did it fit in the grand scheme of things? When and where did it live?
It first shows up in the fossil record around the middle Miocene, maybe 16 million years ago. And what's really striking about Dinotherium is how stable its basic body plan was. It didn't change dramatically over millions of years, apart from generally getting bigger. That tells us it found a really successful ecological niche and just stuck with it.
And sorting out the different species is tricky, I gather. Oh, absolutely. That's always tough with fossils. People used to name dozens of species based on slight differences in bones. Now, scientists think there were probably somewhere between, say, 3 and 6 main species. But it's hard to tell sometimes if a difference in jaw shape, for example, means a whole new species, or just variation within one species, maybe males versus females or different ages.
Yeah, I can see how that'd be tough. So how did this successful, stable giant spread out across the world? Did it start in one place?
The family, the Dinotheridae, seems to have originated in Africa, maybe around 25 million years ago. They did well there, but the big move happened about 7 million years later. They started migrating out of Africa into Europe and Asia. This is part of a really significant event called the proboscidean datum event, or PDE.
The PDE, that sounds important. What was driving that?
It was a whole period, roughly between 21 and 12.5 million years ago, where shifting continents and changing climates created land bridges. These opened up new routes between Africa and Eurasia. And it wasn't just Dinotherium on the move.
Right, it was a whole wave of elephant relatives.
Exactly. They were migrating alongside other amazing creatures like Hemimastodon, Gomphotherium, and even Platybelodon, the one with the weird shovel tusks. So Dinotherium was part of this big dispersal event. And the fossils back it up. We find Dinotherium remains all the way from France across to Pakistan, a huge range.
Incredible journey. But eventually, like all giants, its time came to an end. Probably climate change, competition.
Likely a combination of factors during the Pliocene, yeah. Changing environments, maybe pressure from other evolving large mammals. But its legacy is really defined by that unique anatomy.
So if we were to sum up the Dinotherium experience for you, the listener,
Hmm.
think of it as this amazing evolutionary side branch. A giant that found its groove early on with those downward tusks, sticking to that successful, specialized, low-browsing strategy for millions of years across continents.
And that weird anatomy, those downward tusks, they didn't just puzzle scientists later on. They likely shaped stories much, much earlier. Historians think that when ancient people, like on the Greek island of Samos, found these enormous, strange skulls.
They wouldn't look like any known animal.
Exactly. They might have been woven into myths about giants or strange monsters. This terrible beast was probably sparking human imagination long before we had the science to understand it. And maybe the lesson in that for us, for you, is about how we interpret evidence. The Dinotherium story really highlights that jump from imaginative theories like the pontoon boat to the reality shown by careful observation, like those tiny wear marks. It's a reminder to look closely at the details, to test assumptions, even when the imaginative story is more exciting. It's critical thinking, applied way back in deep time.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
Mhm.
If a creature dead for millions of years could inspire myths just based on its weird skull, what things are we discovering now in science or anywhere that people in the distant future might look back on and completely misunderstand, maybe even build their own myths around? What stands out to you?